now my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Helen Meinzinger. Helen is a retired RCMP officer, military spouse, and devoted mother to her 15-year-old son, Kaiden, who was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, or CF, shortly after birth. Driven by her son's diagnosis, Helen became a passionate advocate and has dedicated herself to raising awareness and supporting others impacted by CF. Over the years, she has held numerous volunteer roles with organizations such as Cystic Fibrosis Canada, Health Partners, and Kaiden Canada, contributing at both local and national levels. Her work spans community engagement, fundraising, education, and advocacy, reflecting the deep commitment to improving the lives of those living with chronic illnesses. As a lived experience volunteer speaker, Helen has shared her story with audiences across Canada. Through her talks, she seeks to inform, inspire, and foster greater understanding of both cystic fibrosis and mental health challenges faced by families like hers. The title of her keynote is In Sickness and in Health, a caregiver's journey through challenge, courage, and compassion. Here's a little taste of what Helen will discuss. When Helen's newborn son, Kaiden, was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, her life was forever changed, but not defined by the diagnosis. Today, Helen will share her powerful story of a caregiver and her family as they navigate the complex realities of living with multiple serious mental and physical health diagnoses. Through moments of hardship, strength, and deep love, Helen explores what it means to persevere in the face of uncertainty. Drawing from personal experience, she highlights the emotional resilience required of caregivers, the often unseen struggles within families, and the importance of compassion, both for others and for oneself. I am sure you will leave with a deeper understanding of the caregiver's role and the enduring power of hope, advocacy, and human connection. I can't wait to hear this talk. Helen, the stage is yours.
I guess I'll start up here. Good morning. Okay, I am live, perfect. So I'm gonna start by making a little change here because honestly, this is not who I am. Who I am is a girl that wears Lululemons and runners, and if I thought I could have got away with that today, I would have. So thank you very much for having me this morning, for the invite. I am a virgin keynote speaker. So this is, you are my first. So, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, or I hope you enjoy it more than I probably am, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous as heck being up here. I've already asked for feedback from some of your folks over at the head table there, and I'm sure I'm gonna get some. So who am I? I think thank you for that introduction. As mentioned, everything I speak about today is lived experience. I am not an expert. I'm an expert at nothing. I am a parent, I'm a caregiver, and everything that I'll chat with you about today is about lived experience. I hugely thank you for the opportunity to be here, for Kelsey, wherever she's at, for putting your faith in me and a fellow connection that hooked me up with you folks. Prior to being here today, I honestly didn't know a whole lot about Huntington's. I did some research, and one of the key things is that both Huntington's and cystic fibrosis fall under Health Partners, and I've been heavily involved with Health Partners over the years, doing lots of fundraising, not just for Cystic Fibrosis Canada, but also for Huntington's as it falls underneath the umbrella, along with epilepsy and the other 19 partners that are part of Health Partners. What I will do for you today is I'm going to take you through a timeline. I'm going to introduce you to my family, specifically to my son and my husband, and then I'm going to finish off with myself. It'll take you through some education on CF, which is where I'm going to start with, and our humble beginnings with our son, and it will end up with my portion about myself and being a caregiver and what this journey has been like for myself. And Kelsey knows I'm a tech dork, so hopefully we can make this work. And I'm going to be moving around because I have nervous energy and I need to get it out. So what I want to do is I want to introduce you to my alphabet family. I am retired RCMP. I spent just about 28 years in the RCMP. My first postings were out in Alberta. I was posted to about 4.5 hours north of Edmonton as my first detachment, and then followed up with going close to Edmonton, and then eventually coming home to Ottawa, where I settled. I met my husband out when I was stationed in Alberta, and he was stationed in Edmonton at the same time, and somehow we got lucky and managed to get a posting back to Ottawa together. We live in a world of acronyms. Being military and being RCMP, everything is an acronym in our world. And I will be using a bunch today, and I'm going to introduce you to a whole bunch today because, as I found out with coming into the health world with my son, everything is acronyms as well. So being introduced. So some of these you're going to learn today. So RCMP, obviously, Sergeant, both my husband and I retired as sergeants. He put 20 years in to the Army and to the Air Force before retiring with severe PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. My son, who takes up a bunch of these acronyms, is ADHD, FLE, which I will explain shortly, or as we get into his story. His mutations, of course, Huntington's and cystic fibrosis share the fact that we're genetic diseases. So he carries 2 mutations. We'll talk about those, gamma 551 delta and delta F508. Kaiden's Care Kits, Veterans Affairs Canada, cystic fibrosis-related diabetes, the NICU, and it goes on and on and on, right? CHEO, Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, Kin Canada, and of course Cystic Fibrosis Canada. That's my alphabet. Those are my alphabet. And we are H, J, and K. We probably should have named our dog I, because then we would have covered off H, I, J, K. But I didn't think that far ahead. So my husband and I met. We are a true couple of the 21st century. I picked him on Lava Life, which was a dating app. Okay? So I did, honest to God. And you know how they say you got to go through a lot of frogs before you meet your handsome prince? I did, I went through a few frogs. So, and not French, sorry if there's any, je parle français, je suis né au Québec, nothing like that. No harm intended there. So, I went on Lava Life, I see this guy in his Air Force uniform and standing beside a fire truck, because at the time he was a fireman with the Air Force. And I thought, okay, here's a guy who's going to probably understand me. I grew up Air Force. My older brother was Air Force. I wear a uniform. Hopefully he's gonna get me, because the guys I had dated before, I was a community policing officer in my community of 15,000. Everybody knew me. It's impossible to meet people. I met him, and we've never been apart since, from day one. And from day one, when I met him face to face, after we did the online stuff, all I wanted to do was touch him. It was an instant draw to my husband, and we have been pals and partners pretty much ever since. Oh, sorry. There we go. I'm too fast. So, when we met, of course, being RCMP and being Air Force, we weren't sure how our life was going to progress, whether we would get posted together, and somehow we lucked out. He was from the Toronto area. He grew up in Mississauga, in what he would call the slums of Mississauga, with a single mom, father who left when he was only 8 years old, left them with him with two younger siblings, eventually a third younger sibling. They didn't have a lot. So he grew up in relative poverty, going to food banks, wearing the same clothes to school. He had a rough upbringing. His mom basically told him at the end of high school, if you don't get out of the house, get a job, you might as well join the Army. And that's what he did. He joined the Army. So let's move on from there to the biggest part of our lives. We moved to Ottawa in 2006, and we had never talked about, we met in 2004, we had never talked about children. We were both set in our careers, both sergeants, go, go, go kind of people, and hadn't talked about it. I was working night shift, I had come home, I was working day shift, I had come home, sitting in the car, we were coaching hockey at the time, and I'm thinking to myself, I had just turned 39. I thought, you know what? We had better decide if we're going to do this kid thing or not, because I'm getting old. My eggs are rotting, right? So it's the truth, right? About half an hour later, after I get home, we get dressed, we get ready, head out to hockey. He's now in the driver's seat, and I'm going to need water because, yeah, you know, my nerves are just shot. Thank you. It's reality, right? I'm sweating like a little piggy up here, and I'm sweating. Hopefully it'll get better. So now we're in the vehicle, and he's driving. And he looks at me in the passenger seat, and he says, "Dear, I've been thinking." Uh-oh. Thank you. Uh-oh. So 30 minutes before, I was sitting in that driver's seat, and he looks at me and says, "I've been thinking, I think we should try to have a child." I'm like, oh my God, get out of my head. That's one of our famous sayings together, is get out of my head, because these things seem to come in at the same time and happen. So it did. It literally, it was there. I said, all right, well, I'm 39. I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to find out, you know, safety, being an older mother, pregnancy, amniocentesis, genetic testing, those kind of things. And lo and behold, I was pregnant 3 months later. Literally. Never thought it was going to happen. Great pregnancy, no issues, had an amniocentesis, showed nothing. Showed we are having a healthy baby boy. And we did, for about the first 12 hours. My son was born in Ottawa at the Montfort Hospital. He was born by C-section at 12:30 a.m. on October 17th in 2009. So he's actually 16. He just turned 16. Yeah, my God, time has flown. We realized very quickly that something was wrong. My son was not taking in my breast milk, and what little breast milk he was taking in, he was throwing up. And he also wasn't passing anything. So the first baby poop is called meconium, that black sticky stuff. He wasn't passing that. I, of course, was recovering from the C-section. My husband was doing a lot of the caring for my son in those early hours. The nurses came in and they said they were going to be taking him from our room and taking him to the nursery because they had some concerns. They didn't really tell us exactly what was going on, or obviously they didn't know at that point. It was the following morning, the Sunday morning, that they came to us and they said, "We have concerns for your son's digestive system and his stomach, and we are going to be taking him to CHIO, to the neonatal intensive care unit at CHIO." As you can imagine, as a new parent, seeing your child wheeled in an incubator, on a gurney, with the team there, and having to sit and say goodbye to your child who is barely a day old. I was a cop. And my role as a cop, and it's always been something that I've been very passionate about in my life, is about protecting people. And I couldn't. I could barely stand, let alone get up and try to protect my son at that point in time and not let them take him away from me. But they did. My husband went with my son. He went to CHIO, got him to the NICU with the ambulance team, got him settled in. I stayed back at the hospital with my parents. And I can recall looking at my mother, who was not only dying as a grandmother inside, but dying as a mother, watching me lose it. The following morning, the Monday, there was nothing they were going to do to keep me in that hospital. Staples or not, I was leaving, and we did. We headed to CHIO, and I got to see my son. As I entered, of course, he was sitting in this little, sleeping in his little open crib. Tubes in his nose, beepers, monitors, everything around him. And again, my gut instinct was, Mama Bear needs to fix this. Mama Bear needs to take all these tubes out and run and do what she's supposed to do and protect her son. This shouldn't be happening. And why is this happening? But I couldn't. So we sat. We spent the next 17 days in the NICU. Through those days, we would go home in the evening because we didn't live too far from CHIO at the time. And of course, the nurses were incredible, the doctors were incredible. And they said, go home, you need rest. You've had major surgery. Go home and get your rest and be ready for him when it's time for him to come home. That first day, that Monday, when we went home in the evening, my husband was outside and he was emptying the car. He brought me to the house. I waddled to the kitchen. And I remember falling to the floor on my knees and crying. Because in those moments, all I could say to myself was, you're a bad mom. This is my fault. Maybe if I'd had my son naturally, this wouldn't have happened. I berated myself because of what was going on, even though at that point in time we had no idea what was truly going on. And I cried till I heard my husband coming in the front door, and then I sucked it all back in because I didn't want him to see me like that. As we spent our journey at CHIO, it was on day 8 that they came in. And we had participated in the rounds every day. So we got to meet the different nurses, the different doctors, the student doctors that were coming in. And we parented as best we could. We would change diapers once he finally started pooping. So in his first 24 hours at CHIO, he had had 2 enemas. Basically what had happened was he had a blockage. It was called meconium ileus. So within his intestinal tract, it had blocked up with thick, sticky mucus, and he couldn't poop. The little muscles just weren't working. So they needed to do what they could to get that moving. So they did the 2 enemas. He had a nasogastric tube giving him laxatives, again, to try to help get things moving. They told us they were thinking about doing a 3rd enema, but they had concerns that they would blow out his little bowel. Thankfully, things started to move. I have never been so happy to see poop in my life. Never so happy to see that first black poop come out of him. So we would go home in the evenings, and the last thing we do before we would go to sleep would be to call back to the NICU and say, is there poop yet? Is the poop still coming? And it was. So now it was a matter of waiting for the diagnosis, what was actually going on. Of course, now in Canada we have the newborn screening that happens. So he was given a prick to the heel, they took his blood and they test for, I'm not even sure how many tests are done. And it came back positive for cystic fibrosis. So it was on day 8 that the head neonatologist came in and she said, I think you know what I'm going to tell you. Your son has cystic fibrosis. Sorry. In that moment, as I sat in my little chair recovering, I had basically been told I was going to outlive my child. My child was going to die in infancy because this is what I knew at the time. My child wasn't going to be able to do the things that I had imagined. I grew up playing sports. I'm a full-blown tomboy, 2 older brothers. I did everything they did. I still do. He wasn't going to play hockey. He wasn't going to play soccer. He wasn't going to golf. And I was already older than he would probably ever live to be. Very quickly, though, thankfully, we learned that that wasn't the truth. So this was 2009. This was not the truth. This doctor was incredible. She sat with us, and I still remember she came over, she put her hand on my knee, and she said, it's okay. Just breathe, right? Just breathe. An important saying for the cystic fibrosis world, and for me right now. She began to educate us about cystic fibrosis. And that's where our journey truly began. So our normal became cystic fibrosis. For 8 hours, we had what we thought, 12 hours, we had a healthy baby. For the next 7-8 days, we had a baby in an unknown reality of what was coming. And now we knew we had cystic fibrosis to deal with. She explained to us that the life expectancy for a child wasn't what we knew from our childhood from the 70s and early 80s. That children and young adults were living longer with CF. That he would play hockey. That he would golf. That, like my husband asked, he could be a Chippendale if he wanted to be. Serious question he asked the doctor that rather. So he could do all of these things, and in fact they told us that he needs to do all of those things because physical health for him, physical fitness, exercise was going to be that much more important to him, which was great. And it gave us a chance. In that moment, it gave us hope. So, let's talk about what cystic fibrosis is. And isn't he just the cutest? I mean, seriously, look at, doesn't look like that now, but I wish he gave me less attitude like he gave me there. Anyway, teenagers. So what we learned. So very quickly, they had mobilized the CHIO CF team. And what an incredible group of people they are. And they told us, they said, take the amount of time that you need as a family. And, they are ready. They're mobilized. They will be here as soon as you are ready. So as she left and closed the little curtain to our NICU pod, my husband and I, of course, we held my son, we hugged each other, we cried our tears, and about 15 minutes later, we looked at each other, we said, let's do this. Because this disease doesn't have a clue what it's taken on and taking on our family. Because we are going to fight. We are going to fight for our son, we're going to fight for the entire community, and we are not going to let this define him or define us. And that's what we started doing. Now, in order to do that, we needed to understand what it meant to care for our son. So what does this new normal look like? So we began to learn about the disease itself. So cystic fibrosis is a salt imbalance, basically, at the cellular level. So for him, and for people with CF, wherever there's a little tube in the body, mucus builds up in those tubes. So for us, are there any doctors in the room? Oh, thank God. Okay, good. Any teachers? Any science teachers? Okay, good. I'm safe. Because, my biology teacher from grade 13 would be laughing at me right now as I'm trying to teach biology. So basically, at a cellular level, what is happening is there's this protein that exists in our cell called the cystic fibrosis transmembrane protein. And for you and I, that protein exists. There's enough of it. It's mobile in the cell. There's a little gate at the top of the cell that opens where that protein, it moves. The salt and the water flow. As it flows, the little cilia on the cell surface move bacteria, germs, all the gunk along. That's what's happening in our lungs. And somebody with cystic fibrosis, it's in their entire body because it is a full system disease. People with cystic fibrosis, that protein can have 5 things that's going on at the cellular level. So there's basically 5 classes of mutations of the cystic fibrosis gene. So the protein can be broken, like misshapen. It can be missing. It can fire randomly, like it doesn't, some cells will get it, some don't. There's a gating mutation where, the protein is there. It can get to the top of the cell, but it can't get out of the cell. When Kaiden was born, they knew of 1,200 mutations of the CF gene. Now they know of over 2,000 of them. So imagine that, 2,005 classes of the mutations. So my son carries, and of course my husband and I are both carriers. So unlike Huntington's, as I've come to learn, is that you have one carrier and there's the 50% chance. With cystic fibrosis, you need 2 carriers. You need both parents to be carriers. And of course there's the 1 in 4 chance that he would get both genes, both mutations of the gene from my husband and I. There'd be a 1 in 4 chance that he would get neither, or there was the 2 in 4 chance that he would be a carrier like his dad and I. We had no idea that we were carriers. It was not tested for in the amniocentesis. I mean, clearly with, at that time, 1,200 mutations, how could they possibly do all of those mutation tests? So his mutations, he carries 1 copy of the most common mutation. 85% of CFers carry at least 1 copy of the delta F508. Now, of course, there's all these other mutations, and many of them are what they call rare mutations, and there still exist mutations out there, CF patients, CF warriors as we call them, that they don't know the mutation. It is an unknown mutation at this point in time, so the science is still growing and moving. So what did our day look like? I'll step back here a second. Kaiden's pancreas doesn't function properly. So it has cysts and fibroids and, of course, the mucus. His lungs have mucus. We don't know yet whether he has a vas deferens, and if he does, whether it's been blocked. So there can be infertility that goes along with it. I don't want to know that for any length of time either as a mother. Definitely don't. 16-year-old boy in high school. And he is kind of cute, but I am biased. So with those blockages, cystic fibrosis becomes this degenerative disease. Everything that we do in our day treats the symptoms. Everything we did in our day treated the symptoms. So with everything that he eats, he would have to take enzymes. So unlike you and I, whose pancreas functions and secretes enzymes to break down fat, proteins, carbohydrates, so our body can absorb it and do what it needs to do. For people with cystic fibrosis, their bodies do not properly absorb those. So back in the day, when we were losing children in infancy, it was actually often because of malnutrition, failing to thrive. because they literally couldn't keep anything in their system and they would fade away and die. So with these enzymes, with the discovery of these pork enzymes, basically artificial enzymes, they are able to absorb more of what is required for their system. But we were told he needs to eat 50% more calories, fats, and carbs and proteins than a child who does not have CF. So I became an excellent fat cook. My husband and I did not eat the same meals as my son because, no, it would have been bad. So I learned about cooking, about baking, putting extra fats, calories, proteins anywhere I could. And it was, you want this? Yeah. Broccoli? No, you don't need that. You need this, right? Get that meat into you. Get that whipped cream, that butter. Get that salt, because they need extra salt as well. So prepping food, trying to get fat on him. People with cystic fibrosis, their immune system isn't damaged. But the issue is because it's difficult for them to put on weight, and because there are bacteria in our environment that won't harm you and I, they can harm them. Because what happens is they get into the lungs, they are antibiotic resistant, they get locked into that thick, sticky mucus, and they hide. They wind up having to go to hospital, go on seriously strong antibiotics, like courses, 4-week courses of antibiotics, and some of them are deadly. And one of them, I mean, it occurs everywhere in our environment. I think its percentage is something like 75% of people with CF will eventually have a Pseudomonas infection in their lungs, simply because it's even in our drinking water. Rotting potatoes, rotting onions, so it's everywhere. So in our home, we would always have enzymes. Everywhere we went, we had enzymes. We had applesauce because, of course, as an infant, he couldn't swallow without having applesauce to put those little enzymes in. Everything that he took in, whether it was milk, anything. Always had antibiotics on scene, because if he got a cold, he would take the antibiotics right away. I know it's kind of contrary to the viral versus bacterial, but for him it was about protecting his little body so that he didn't pick something else up. Vitamins, extra vitamins. Because some of the vitamins are fat soluble, he was required to take extra vitamins just to put him in a position where he could potentially be like the same as any other child. Physiotherapy. You've probably all seen at some point in time children, either over a ball or leaned over, wearing the vests. We did something called tappy tappies. And I often talk about the silver linings with cystic fibrosis. I know it's kind of crazy, right? But we try to look for the positives wherever we can. Twice a day we would do physiotherapy, and he was very healthy, and he is still very healthy, and we're very lucky for that. We would do tappy tappies. So basically they were these little plunger-like things. When he was little, they were just these teeny tiny things. So when the CHIO team came, the CF team came to us, that was the first thing they started teaching us. And I'm like, you want me to do what to my child's chest? He's like 8 days old. These tiny little things. And we would tap, I got 2 of them on. We would tap the different areas on his lungs, basically to help him get rid of anything that was sticking, right? I know that when I've got something in my throat, I tend to hit my chest a little bit to try to clear it out. So that's the idea, right, is to get it moving and to help them because they're just not strong enough to get it out. And the silver lining for us was I got to spend twice every day doing these amazing tappy tappies with my son. And it was a bonding experience. My little man, between my legs and doing these little tappy tappies, and we would sing. In the beginning, it was the ants go marching 2 by 2, right, just to keep the rhythm. And then it was a big hug before the front tappies went. And then it was after tappies. It was before tappies cuddles. It was in between tappies cuddles. It was after tappies cuddles. And this went on till he was probably 7 or 8. I didn't always get the cuddles, but when he was 8, I still did. I don't get them as much anymore. So that was our routine. The other part of our routine was cleanliness, avoiding people that were sick. So when COVID hit, we had COVID covered, because in our house we had face masks, we had hand sanitizer. You knew you didn't come into my home if you were sick. Now, although at that time my son was already in school and we had freed him and sent him out into the world where children are really disgusting, the way they put their fingers in their noses and every other place. That was a difficult transition as well, right? Sending him off to school. The interesting thing that happened with us was once we started to find out about to find out about breakthroughs. I became involved in Cystic Fibrosis Canada right away because I needed to, I had to, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. Every 3 months we go to CF Clinic. Every year he goes through annual testing. So at CF Clinic, of course, they check his weight and his height because the growth chart is super important. And I always manage to keep him a porky little baby. I can't do anything about his height, which he blames me for every day. So his height, he's 5'6", I'm 5'4". He's still a little angry. We're still hoping we're going to see some height growth, but I don't know. So they do that. They do a throat swab because, of course, they want to test for those bacteria. Because if he did test positive for the bacteria, of course, he would have to go on these masses of antibiotics. Thankfully, we've had scares, but he's never had to go on the mass doses. Every session, he does a lung function test, again, because they want to know what the health of his lungs are. Because when that thick, sticky mucus gets in there and gets down into especially the deep little tubes in our lungs, it's impacted. And he gets in trouble pretty much every clinic because he does not do his own physiotherapy. Mom has to raise her hands at some point in time and say, it's on you, bud. You can listen to the doctor giving you heck. You'll be at the adult clinic soon enough. Blood work every year, chest x-ray every year. So this is our normal. This is what it looks like for him. But what we started to learn when he was about 4 years old was about the genetics. We really started to dig into the genetics because we had heard about research. We'd heard about drugs that instead of treating the symptoms, that there was this potential that it was going to make this massive change. And it was my husband that keyed into the fact that the mutation that only impacts 4% of the people with cystic fibrosis, and in Canada we have about 4,300 people with CF. So 4% of that, about 160, 170 people. We heard about this study that was going on, these trials that were happening in the United States. The company's called Vertex. Gene modulators. Now, I did a little bit of research. I was reading about Huntington's, and I know that there's going to be some joy in this weekend in the learning about some of the research that's coming through. I met Tara yesterday as we were coming on the bus from the airport, and we were chatting a little bit. Where you folks are right now with the potential of what might be for your future, for the future of Huntington's, and I'm getting my goosebumps again, is where we were when my son was 4. Because we started to hear about this drug, about what it was, the potential, what it could do. The drug was called Kaiden. Little blue pills, the irony of that, but anyway. Anyway. Are you all awake out there? Like, seriously. I have a son, right? We haven't had that discussion yet because that's an uncomfortable one for Mom. So what we started to learn about this drug was that it was only available for certain people with CF, and it just so happened that my son carries one of the mutations in the class of mutation that this drug would impact. So as you can well imagine, we got on the bandwagon. It was like, when is this going to happen? When is it going to come to Canada? When are we going to gain access? What is this going to cost? When can he have it? What's the difference going to be? What are we looking at? The day before his 6th birthday, we gained access to Kaiden. 2 little blue pills, one in the morning, one in the evening, with a minimum of 10 grams of fat to make sure that his little body could absorb it. And we gained access to this. So what does this drug do? At the cellular level, okay, that's rare mutation is a gating mutation. So for my son, that protein, right, when it gets to the cell surface, imagine a sticky gate, squeaky gate, and you squirt WD-40 on it. He takes that drug, and that gate opens. What that means is now that protein can move out of the cell. That thick, sticky mucus can move and can get cleared. Pretty much a miracle, right? Or as close as we felt we could get at that point in time. They do a test when they are testing for CF. So because CF is a salt disorder, for years before tests were really known about, children would actually be diagnosed because parents would come in and say, my child tastes salty when I kiss their forehead. There are literally stories, old stories, of nurses making diagnoses of children, doctors making diagnoses from licking children. I remember our first gut doctor at the clinic, when my boy was so cute, she said, "Oh, I just want to lick his belly." Because she was of an age where, I mean, this was one of these things. They would come in, and they did. I loved eating his apples because he would eat his apples and his hands would be all sweaty. And then when he'd be like, "All done, Mummy," he'd give me the apple, and I got a salty apple. So, the sweat test. Literally, looks like a little watch. It goes on their arm. They heat him up, and they take the sweat out and they test it. So for you and I in the room, even as a carrier, I test in the range of like 0 to 30, and it's millimoles per whatever of sweat, of sodium in our body. For somebody who is potentially on the CF scale, they're 30 to 60. For people with CF, they're 60 and over. So my son was salty. His first sweat test, he tested at like 111. Okay, so we already knew, we already had the diagnosis, it was all good. Once he started Kaleido, of course, really the only measure they had, other than potentially FEVs, was this sweat test. So his first test after starting Kaleido, he went from 111 down to 88. Now, of course, it varies daily. Like if we did sweat tests every day, which of course we would never do, it would vary daily. But he went to 88. 6 months later, we went back in, another sweat test. He tested in that 30 to 60 range. So now we've come out of definite CF into a range of, he could have CF, he might not have CF. His following sweat test, which blew us all away, he was in the normal range. Which meant, if he walked into a hospital and had a sweat test done, they would not diagnose him with cystic fibrosis. He has cystic fibrosis, regardless of that sweat test. But basically what we were being shown is that this drug, these 2 little blue pills, have become a control, have become a potential to reduce the harm, reduce the degeneration that is put on their bodies. Prior to these drugs coming on scene, double lung transplants, failing to thrive even as adults, not being able to breathe, not being able to cough out these thick, sticky bits of mucus that have been in their lungs. Adults who started on Kaleido at the time would talk about being able to get stuff out of their lungs. We're seeing lung function tests beyond what they'd ever seen. And that was the start. That was the start of it. So this company Vertex continued to develop because, of course, 4%, it's only 160 people, and we were lucky enough that our son was one of those 160 people in this country at a cost of $360,000 a year. Yeah. Covered. Okay. As a federal government employee, thankfully, we were fully covered. But I do know that there were families out there that struggled, that didn't have the same coverage as we did, and struggled to gain access. Advocacy, first off, getting the drug approved in Canada, getting it across Canada, was a battle. But we won that battle. So, of course, Vertex continued, because you can't just help 4% of the population go, whoa, win, off we go. There's still 96% of the population. There's still all of these other mutations out there that they need to help, especially that 85%er, because imagine if you can do something for that class of mutation that 85% of people have. 2 more iterations of the drug came along and could help having some impact. Till just a few years ago, they came out with their 4th one, called Trikafta. So Trikafta is a mix of 3 gene modulators. So it has the Kaleido in it for the gait. It has, and my science on this one is not as good as it was with the Kaleido, but it's basically doing 2 other things within that cell. I'm assuming it's helping the protein be mobile and also ensuring that it's coming, there's enough of that protein. My son gained access to Trikafta about 5 years ago now. He gained access to it. 85% of people can use this drug. The stories that we have heard from our community, people who were on the double lung transplant list, coming off of the lung transplant list. People who had never been able to walk up a flight of stairs without oxygen, flipping off their oxygen tank. People who had never been able to hold a job, whose basically their daily lives was doing physiotherapy, was doing the care required to just make it to the next day. Being able to change their lives. One of the ones that touches me the most because of how my son was born with this meconium because there are children that are born with the bowels that are perforated, they burst, they wind up having to have surgery, they wind up with stoma bags in the beginning. We were lucky, obviously, to avoid that. Was a mother who herself was a carrier, not diagnosed with CF, a carrier, who they were able to diagnose the baby as having meconium in the womb. She took Trikafta, and that child was born without a blockage. Right? So we have come a very long way, very long way. Some of the difficulties is that there are other health side effects. A young lady I know in the Ottawa area, she couldn't take Trikafta because it was giving her seizures. Other ones where there's kidney issues. So although it's a fix for many, it's still not a fix for all. And of course, there's still that other 15%. So they continue to work. They continue to fight. When my son was born, the median age of survivability was, see, my numbers are off. We're actually 4,500 plus people now. We were told median age of survivability was 37. I was 2 weeks away from my 40th birthday when he was born. Which meant at that time that half of the people born in 2009 could potentially make it to 37. Right? We were still losing young adults. We're still losing children to the disease. Today, in Canada, and we are ahead of the US, woohoo, just like we're going to be at the ball game tonight. We are going to be ahead. The median survivability in Canada now is 62. So what that means is a child born today has a chance to hit 62. I hope I hit 62. Not soon, but I'll get there. So for us, we have hope. We have hope in our community. We are seeing amazing things. I'm seeing young people who we met when my son was just a newborn, having children, getting married. But one of the, I don't want to call it side effects, but one of the things now is mental health. Can you imagine being told when you're a child, knowing that you're not going to see adulthood? And ooh, look, here's adulthood. I didn't prepare for this, right? I'm not ready for this. I was told I was going to die, and now all of a sudden they're saying, hey, here's these magic pills, and you're putting your faith in these magic pills. And I have put my faith in these magic pills, but at the same time, I'm not an idiot. I'm not 100% convinced, because what happens if these pills stop working? What happens if my son develops one of the side effects and he has to come off of these pills? So we still fight. We will still fight. It's not a cure. It's not a cure for CF. It's a control, meaning that we're buying time, right? But obviously within the CF community, we hope that one day there's going to be a cure. In addition to these side effects, the impact that CF has, it does affect the rest of the body as well. My son was diagnosed about 3 years ago with cystic fibrosis related diabetes. Everybody says, is that type 1 or type 2? It's not. It's its own thing. And it's because his pancreas doesn't function properly. So he's now on insulin as part of it, and that's one of the side effects of cystic fibrosis. He was born with a dual ureter, nothing to do with the CF, but it was discovered because we were in the NICU and because of all of the testing that was being done. And basically one of his kidneys is damaged. This kid right out of the blocks has had it tough. Just prior to COVID, we started to notice something strange in my son. So now he's ADHD, he was on drugs for that. He's on all of these other medications that we don't know what the side effects are going to be. And we start to see these things that are very strange movements, blankness, being gone for a minute or two, or what felt like a minute or two that was probably more like 45 seconds. I took him to the emergency room. First time, they sent us home. Said, we'll do a neuro consult. Happened again, I took him back. Nope, I want to see neuro now. My son was diagnosed with frontal lobe epilepsy. Has nothing to do with cystic fibrosis. The kid can't catch a break. He's tough as hell, let me tell you. So he deals with that on a daily basis as well. We've gone through some tough times. He was fully under control. They decided to take him off of the medication because, coming to his 16th birthday, let's test and make sure it's not just the medications. Let's see if he potentially outgrew the FLE. Sadly, when we went in, back in to say, hey, listen, we're seeing signs again. His epilepsy was not resolved, so he's back on medications, and we're now, I think, we are at the balance of stopping his epileptic seizures at this point. So this poor kid has had it tough. Now I want to introduce you to my husband. I'm going to check my time here because I do a lot of talking. How much time do I have? 20 minutes? Okay. My husband. Not long after we moved to Ottawa, I had been coming off a night shift, lying in bed, trying to sleep, when the bedroom door flew open and my husband in tears came running across the room and dives onto the bed, bawling. I thought, oh my God, somebody's died. Somebody has died. What is wrong? I can't take it. I can't take it. What can't you take? I feel like somebody has their hands around my throat. I feel like somebody's standing on my chest. I feel like there's half of an apple stuck in my throat all of the time. I can't take it. This was the first sign of post-traumatic stress disorder in my husband. My husband had done 11 years in the Army. He was stationed in Bosnia. He saw stuff that a human shouldn't have to see, shouldn't have to suffer, shouldn't have to go through from the other side of things, but people shouldn't have to see from his side of things. But he did. Unstable beginning, tough upbringing, not a lot of love, not a lot of support, maybe a weaker foundation, as I understand it. And this was the start to what his journey would look like. When he first sought help, they medicated him. We don't know how to deal with it, right? So this is 2007. We didn't know, PTSD, mental health, it's not that long ago. We just didn't talk about it. Even as a police officer, you didn't talk about mental health, God forbid. Military, you don't talk about that. It doesn't exist. It's in the shadows. We hide from it. They medicated him. They put him on benzodiazepines. They basically turned my husband into a turtle, into a shell of a human being. A man with no feelings, no emotions, nothing. Dead on the inside. But I guess it took the feeling of not having the apple in his throat. His signs: anger, intolerance, rage. He knew no other emotion than anger. He didn't know, and he knew love. I want to preface that. My husband has mostly been an incredible father. We can't control mental health, and one of the reasons I'm still with him and I still fight every day to keep my marriage is because my husband has never given up fighting. He never quit. He's always sought ways to get better. And he's a good dad. He's an even better dad today than what he was in the beginning when he was truly sick. So as a police officer, PTSD, what is this? This is bullshit. Pardon my language. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. So I had to learn. It took fights. It took tears. It took anger from my perspective. It took me thinking that my husband was cheating on me, because how can he not love me and show me affection if he's not cheating on me? I had no idea. I had no idea how these symptoms would be. And it was the PTSD. Even through the medications. He would drink. Basically anything for him that would numb him was a good thing. Okay? Was a good thing. I sought help. So here I had been a police officer. I'd been a community police officer. I've shaven my head twice for cancer, once for cystic fibrosis. I was in schools. I was teaching kids about not using drugs and alcohol. I was involved. I volunteered. I coached hockey. I started a hockey community out west in our small community of Fort Saskatchewan. I was part of that. I did everything in my community. But now, here I was in a position of, I didn't understand what was going on in my own home, with my own husband. And I sought help. And it came after having an explosion at him where I was basically looking for an understanding and an answer. Why? Why are things like this? And no word of a lie, he was sitting from where you are to me, and I was bawling, looking at him. And he could do nothing. He couldn't get out of that chair and come over and console me. He couldn't explain to me why he was feeling the way he felt or how he was dealing the way he was dealing, because he didn't understand it himself. And he was a turtle. He was a shell of a human being. It was after that that I realized that I needed help. But I didn't need help at that point, because I wasn't going to admit that I needed help. I needed to understand. I needed somebody who could educate me and who could help me understand what my husband was going through. So I found my psychologist. And she's incredible. So she began teaching me about PTSD. The window of tolerance. God, I hated those words. He's not in his window of tolerance. Well, no shit. Honestly, I'm not in my window of tolerance, but do I get a break from that? No, but he has mental health issues. And I'm minimizing, I'm laughing, but you can understand where I'm coming from, the craziness that it has been over all of these years. So I began to understand a little bit, but it didn't fix things, it didn't make things better. It just meant that, okay, I get it. He's having troubles. He decided to come off the benzodiazepines on his own. He went through withdrawals on his own. Let's not tell your wife that that's what we're going to do, but let's go off of them. This has happened a number of times with different medications. And he decided he wanted to switch to CBD. And this is prior to it being CBD and THC. It was prior to it being legal, of course, and I was a drug cop. Oh, hi dear. I want to vaporize marijuana in our house. Okay. Right? What am I going to say? I'm not going to say no. I did, but Anyway, that became a sticking point. So as you can imagine, I'm being told, you're not letting me have my medicine. Okay. I did. I gave in. He's tried numerous things over the years, and what it looked like for me on the inside. Isolation, because nobody on the outside knew what was going on. No one saw the inside. There was never resolution. So you can imagine being in a relationship where we get into a fight. You leave. You don't leave the house, because you wouldn't leave the house. You go to the basement and you hide. And that hiding can last up to 6 days. That hiding means no interaction. Until suddenly you decide to pop back out of the basement and everything is good in your world, but I've had no resolution. Because I can't talk to you about what you've said, what you've done, how you made me feel, because you're not in your window of tolerance. So for years I walked around eggshells in my own home. And I'm not going to minimize physical violence, domestic abuse, but I swear if he had hit me, it would have been easier, because I could have hit him back harder. But I couldn't. I had no weapons. I had no defense mechanisms against what was going on in our home. So he suffered suicidal ideations. One of the scariest moments was coming home from work, and every day at the end of the day, or as I was coming home, I would text him and say, okay, on my way. Need me to pick anything up? Is the boy home? Yeah, yep. Of course, I drive home. His truck's in the driveway. Go to the house, the door's locked. Why would he have locked the door? I walk in the house and I start shouting their names. Then I'm hearing nothing. I'm getting no response. I walked around my home wondering when I was going to open a door and find both my husband and my son dead. My husband is not a violent man. My husband has never raised his hand to me And he never would. He's scared of me, just saying. He's just not a violent man. But in that moment of uncertainty, knowing what he was going through, in my heart, in my head, it was, all hell has broken loose in my life, and they're gone. And I'm texting friends, is Jay with you? Is Kaiden with you? Where are they? Oh, several minutes later I get, oh, hi dear, sorry, I went to Rachel's place. Thanks. He didn't know that I had gone through that till several years later. 2017, the admission came. Dear, I'm suicidal. I don't want to be here. I need help. He was admitted to Homewood, just outside Toronto here, and he spent 2 months there. Basically, I became a single mother for 2 months, tried to answer to my 8-year-old and explain to him why Daddy was always mad. He would sleep with me every night, and I would squeeze him and cuddle him and hold him, and explain to him that, Daddy's sick. Daddy has a sickness, but Daddy's doing his best to get better. And he has. He has always tried to get better. In fact, he went in for surgery on his knee, ironically. And I forgot where my slides are. No, there we go. Sorry, I'm going ahead. He happened to get an what are the thing that they put you out with? Sorry, menopause is hitting. Thank you, anesthesia. You win a prize. They put him out. There was ketamine in that anesthesia. He came out of the hospital, and I was like, wait a minute, who is this guy? Literally meniscus surgery. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to jinx this. It was 30 days before he looked at me and he goes, dear, have you noticed a difference in me? Yeah, just a little. He reached out to the hospital, and he's always studied the medications that he's been on. He's always done his own research. And he reached out to the anesthesiologist, and he asked, and they said, yes, there's ketamine in it. So that was the pursuit of a new drug. And he's now on ketamine. He's on a ketamine pill, believe it or not. Once a week he takes this ketamine. And it has been, life-changing is a huge word, but it has been life-changing. It has changed a lot that has gone on in our home. It's enabled him to cope. I don't think I've heard the word window of tolerance for a very long time, thank God. Because he is more tolerant and he is more capable. Upon coming out of Homewood, one of my demands was marriage counseling. And we still go to marriage counseling. I have a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and you'll learn my story a little bit here as I rush through. He has a psychologist, and my son has a psychologist. We have put everything in place to try to ensure that we are all being looked after, especially my son, in the best way possible. All right, everyone saw the hats I wore, and no one saw inside the head that held them. When my son was born, I immediately got involved because I couldn't sit by and watch. I created something called Kaiden's Care Kits. I decided that let's put together a kit for the next family at CHIO who's going to be diagnosed with a child with cystic fibrosis. We're going to put things in it that we learned, we used, that would help us. I wrote a story from Kaiden's perspective. I put everything in there that I thought would help and built it. And then I joined Kin Canada, and they said, let's make it bigger, let's do this. Let's try to get this national, not just CHIO. So the first kit went to CHIO the day before his first birthday to the family, and that family eventually reached out, said thank you. And then we decided let's make it bigger, and we did. I joined Kin Canada. I threw myself into anything and everything that I could to make a difference for my son and for the CF community as a whole. And as I come to know now, was so that I didn't have to deal with what was going on at home. Because if you're busy, if you stay active, if you keep the mind going, then you can maybe ignore the bad stuff. Got my son involved in sports. I started coaching everything that I possibly could. I always had wanted him to be a hockey player because I started when I was a kid. I was that one girl who played with all of the boys. Done everything. Started fundraising. Of course, we needed to pay for these kits. Initially, I thought it would come out of my own pocket. So I joined Kin Canada, and Kin Canada said, yes, we're going to support you. Ran golf tournaments. shaved my head. Our walk for cystic fibrosis every year. I think our first year we raised $18,000 for our walk. He was cute and it was easy to sell, so people wanted to donate, and of course they knew our story. I was caregiving, I was working full-time. I took on provincial positions. I took on local positions with Cystic Fibrosis Canada, with Kin Canada. I was traveling across the country speaking and sharing about CF so that we could raise funds, so that we could make a difference. And I was hiding. Not only was I hiding from my husband and from my family, I was hiding from everybody who knew me, because everybody on the outside, of course we posted on Facebook, we still do, was, oh my gosh, I don't know how you're doing what you're doing. It was when my husband went to Homewood that I made my first post. I had become the chapter president for cystic fibrosis in the Ottawa area. I was working as the Cystic Fibrosis Canada and Kin Canada National Liaison. I was on the Volunteer Advisory Board, and I was doing everything. And it was time for me to recognize that everything that I was doing wasn't just helping me, it was probably killing me inside. And I came out on Facebook and explained to everybody, first off, about my husband going to Homewood, that he would be gone. And now people saw, oh my God, you were carrying all of this stuff, but now in addition you're carrying his mental health? We had no idea. Everybody just thought he was a jerk. Because he could be a jerk on the outside. Trust me, in front of the public, if you didn't know what he was battling, he would come across as a jerk, right? Hard to get along with. No tolerance. And people said, how are you doing this? But I did continue. I continued. I kept on with that chapter role for a little bit longer, and then eventually something happened. I was at home, and of course my husband decided, in this craziness of our life, he decided to bring a puppy into our world, you know. Yeah, and not just a puppy, but a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, a very stubborn type A dog breed. I was literally trying to get out the door to go and coach some university students or college students to do their fundraiser for CF, because I was chapter president. And this dog has got a sock. This puppy has a sock, and I need to get that sock because this dog is going to eat that sock. And I chased this dog around the house. Yeah, because that worked. Worked really well. And I can recall, once I got the sock and once I got the dog in her kennel, I can recall seeing myself in the mirror. Literally looking at myself in the mirror and going, this isn't good. This is not good. I had stopped seeing my psychiatrist because I figured I had learned everything about PTSD. Guess what? I started going back. I was out for a walk later that day with a girlfriend. I was telling her what was going on, and she looked at me and she goes, Helen, I think this is about more than just the dog. Okay. And it was. Of course it was. So from the outside, people saw the person doing everything. But on the inside, I was breaking. In 2019, when my son was diagnosed with frontal lobe epilepsy, that was the final straw for me. Even though I was still trying to do my best volunteering and do everything that I could for our community, I needed to learn how to find my way through. Tears at the office, breakdowns. My colleagues knew at that point in time because I had been open. My bosses knew, especially when my husband went to Homewood for the 2 months. They had to understand that I was now a single parent for 2 months. I went to see my GP, and I looked at her and I said, I need some time off work. For me, that was a huge, big deal to ask for time off. She said, Helen, I've watched you for the last few years, and I've watched you, and she was also my husband's doctor at the time. She said, I've watched you decline. And she said, okay, I'm going to give you a couple. And I went, weeks? She goes, no, I'm putting you off for a couple of months. No. I can go back early, right? So I can come back in, and you're going to let me go back to work. If I'm good, I can go back in, right? I was off for 9.5 weeks, or 9.5 months, excuse me. 9.5 weeks, that's a movie. Sorry, I do have ADHD as well, just gonna say. So my brain goes to places, right? Part of that final recognition before I went into the doctor was I had a car crash. I would find myself out driving and I would have no idea where I was going. I had no idea. I would be lost. And I would think about just continuing to drive away. My son always drew me back, because he's my anchor. But I was so out of it on the road, I smashed into somebody from behind because I was so distracted. And that was a wake-up call. I mean, I could have hurt somebody, I could have hurt myself. But I wasn't willing to admit that through everything that we had battled through everything that I had gone through, that I needed help. So when my doctor put me off for that 9.5 months, when I did get back to work, I was working desk job at the time, and of course everybody was working from home in Ottawa during COVID anyway. I was not an operational police officer. I was never able to go back to work fully. I managed to get to 6 hours a day, every day, like 5 days of the week, but eventually had to back down to 5 because my anxiety, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. Some of that, of course, comes from work, but some of it comes from being a caregiver, from everything that we had experienced, everything that we had gone through. I was also diagnosed with what they call CPTSD. So, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. My husband has post-traumatic stress disorder. He suffered trauma, PTSD. I went through, there's a saying, and I apologize, I can't think about it. It's like the cuts of 1,000 small knife cuts. That's what chronic PTSD is. It's that over time, the beaten down, not literally, beating oneself down. I know I've only got a couple minutes left, so I want to finish with something on compassion. It's hard to be compassionate to ourselves. It's so easy to show it to other people. For some of us anyway, it is, right? Like it's just easy. I wish more people would do it in the world. And I have this analogy that I use, that we all carry this invisible bag on our back. Some days my bag may be empty. I'm not carrying a heavy load. Other days, like that poor fella in the backpack, my load is heavy. So just imagine you're dealing with somebody, whether it's at work, whether it's in your day-to-day life, and you have an interaction with them and it's a negative interaction. Maybe that person's bag is loaded with rocks. Maybe that little piece of compassion that you can offer them, right? Maybe the beginner driver, my son's going to start driving in about 6 months. That beginner driver on the road that we want to honk at. We don't know that they're a beginner, but we want to honk at them. We want to give them the finger as we drive by. Maybe it's an 85-year-old grandmother. Maybe it's a beginner driver. A little bit of compassion. If we think in that way, we're going to be better to other people. But the reality is we have to think about ourselves as well. And it's not easy. I never thought that I would be the person that was asking for help, that needed help, because I'm far too tough for that. Far too tough for that. And my psychologist hates when I say the word broken. It took me getting near to a breaking point to finally realize that I needed help. It shouldn't get that far, and I don't know what you folks go through, because obviously what I deal with is different than what you deal with. But I would imagine there's a lot of similarities, a lot of the same feelings. You have a lot on your plate. We all do. Just in regular life, we have a lot on our plate. But dealing with Huntington's, dealing with CF and PTSD and all of these other things, it's a heavy load to carry. Ask for help. Take a step back. I have slowly gotten back into fundraising and being involved in the CF community, but I learned a really important word: no. Yeah. When we moved to Ottawa, after all of the volunteering I did when I was stationed out in Alberta, I said to my husband, I said, okay, dear, you have to teach me how to say no. Because I was doing everything. Well, who knew, right? That I would continue to do everything. And more. And just about, So what do? I retired. That was one of the first things. Woohoo! And I do Pilates every day. I try to walk every day. As you can see, I do it anyway. I try to get out in nature. I talk to my friends and my family. I do my best to work with my husband. Shit's gonna happen. It's gonna continue to happen. He has an illness. I'm not in the best shape either. It's gonna continue. But I've committed to fighting with him. Not with him. That was good. I'm committed to fighting with him for sure. I am committed to fighting for him and for my son, and to advocate for both of them. I think my time is probably up, so I should probably shut it off there. But it's my family. That was taken a year past. My son is an extremely healthy young man. He arm wrestles at school. He likes to bodybuild. He's got pretty amazing arms. He looks like his mom, so he's so darn cute. He plays hockey. I've been coaching him since he was a tot, and he's now in U18. He's a goalie. So I'm a head coach and a goalie mom. I don't know what his future holds, but I'm going to be there for him as long as I can. So I thank you. I thank you for allowing me to be a virgin with you today. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I hope that this news that is coming through for you in the science world, and I hope they can science the hell out of Huntington's just like they're doing with CF, and that you will see positive in the very near future for yourselves, your family, whoever it is that you're here for. And I wish you all nothing but the best. So thank you.